No, Rikki Tikki Tavi. Rikki Tikki was a mongoose, rather like a little cat in his fur and his tail, but quite like a weasel in his head and habits. His eyes and the end of his restless nose were pink. He could scratch himself anywhere he pleased with any leg, front or back, that he wished to use. He could fluff up his tail till it looked like a bottle brush, and his war cry as he scuttled through the long grass was Rikki Tikki 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 Tikki. One day, a high summer flood washed him out of the burrow where he lived with his father and mother, and carried him kicking and clucking down a roadside ditch. He found a little wisp of grass floating there, and he clung to it till he lost his senses. When he revived, he was lying in the hot sun in the middle of a garden path, very draggled indeed, and a small boy was saying, "Here's a dead mongoose. Let's have a funeral." "No," said his mother. "Let's take him in and dry him. Perhaps he isn't really dead." They took him into the house, and the man picked him up between his finger and thumb and said he was not dead, but half choked. They wrapped him in cotton wool, warmed him over a fire, and he opened his eyes and he sneezed. "Now," said the big man, "don't frighten him, and we'll see what he'll do." It's the hardest thing in the world to frighten a mongoose, because he is eaten up from nose to tail with curiosity. And the motto of all the mongoose family is, run and find out. And Rikki Tikki was a true mongoose. He looked at the cotton wool, decided that it was not good to eat, and ran all around the table, sat up, put his fur in order, scratched himself, and jumped onto the small boy's shoulder. "Don't be frightened, Teddy," said his father. That's his way of making friends. There he is. There he is there.
Wait, Daddy, why do they like being stroked?
Like cats and stuff do, right?
Well, why do they like being stroked?
Do you like your hair being brushed?
It's kind of hard. Kind
Okay.
of itchy.
Well.
My hair's not as soft.
Are you a mongoose?
No.
There you go then.
We don't like.
Ouch!
Getting...
He's tickling under my chin, said Teddy. Rikki Tikki looked from between the boy's collar and neck, snuffed at his ear, and climbed onto the floor where he sat rubbing his nose. "Good gracious," said Teddy's mother. "That's a wild creature. I suppose he's tame because we've been kind to him." "Are all mongooses like that?" "Or all mongooses are like that," said her husband. "If Teddy doesn't pick him up by the tail or try to put him in a cage, he'll run in and out of the house all day long. Let's find him something to eat." They gave him a little piece of raw meat. Rikki Tikki liked it immensely. And when he had finished that, he went out onto the veranda and sat in the sunshine and fluffed up his fur to make it dry at the roots. Then he felt better. He ate more things. There are more things to find out about in this house, he said to himself, than all my family could find out in all their lives. I shall certainly stay and find out. He spent the day roaming all over the house. He nearly drowned himself in the bathtub, and he put his nose into the ink on the writing table, and he burned the end of it on the big man's cigar, for he climbed up into the man's lap to see how writing was done. Nightfall, he ran into Teddy's nursery to watch how the kerosene lamps were lighted. That's an old lamp. When Teddy went to bed, Rikki Tikki climbed up there too. But he was a restless companion, because he had to get up and attend to every noise through it all the night, to find out what had made it. Teddy's mother and father came in last thing to look at their boy and Rikki Tikki awake on the pillow. "I don't like that," said Teddy's mother. "He might bite the child." "He'll do no such thing," said the father. "Teddy is safer with that little beast than if he had a bloodhound to watch him. If a snake came into the nursery now—" But Teddy's mother didn't want to think of anything so awful. In the morning, Rikki Tikki came to early breakfast on the veranda, riding on Teddy's shoulder, and they gave him a banana and some boiled egg.
It's really not that fair to live where snakes live.
But snakes live in lots of places, yeah.
Not here.
Not here.
Daddy,
This is in India.
Daddy.
What?
You know squirrels.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen one versus a snake and they literally dodge almost every attack.
Good squirrel.
Daddy, why is it that some Indian females have like gems on their head?
Because they like how it looks.
Or like in.
They're not in, they're just decorated. They're not in. It's either painted on or it's on a little headdress. They're never in. They're not in their skin. They take it off at night. Anyway, let's read the Well, lots of people take off. I take off my watch at night, right?
Yeah.
So,
The glasses.
early in the morning, Rikki Tikki came early and they gave him banana and boiled egg. He sat on all their laps, one after the other, because every well-brought-up mongoose hopes to be a house mongoose someday and have room to run about in. And Rikki Tikki's mother, she used to live in the general's house, Siguli, I don't know where that is, somewhere in India, had carefully told Rikki what to do if he ever came across white men. And Rikki Tikki went out into the garden, they mean Englishmen really, and Rikki Tikki went out to the garden to see what was to be seen. There was a large garden, half cultivated, with bushes as big as summer houses, of Marshall Neil roses, lime and orange trees, clumps of bamboo and thickets of high grass. Rikki Tikki licked his lips. "This is a splendid hunting ground," he said, and his tail grew all bottle brushy at the thought of it, and he scuttled up and down the garden, snuffling here and there until he heard very sorrowful voices in the thorn bush. It was Darzy the tailor bird and his wife. They had made a beautiful nest by putting 2 big leaves together and stitched them up at the edges with fibres, and had filled the hollow with cotton and downy fluff. And the nest swayed to and fro as they sat on the rim and cried. "What's the matter?" asked Rikki Tikki. "We are feeling miserable," said Darzy. "One of our babies fell out of the nest yesterday, and Nag ate him."
Who's Nag?
Said Rikki Tikki. "That's very strange.
Who's Nag?
But I am a stranger here. Who is Nag?" Darzy and his wife cowered down in the nest without answering. For from the thick grass at the foot of the bush came a low sss, a horrible sound that made Rikki Tikki jump back 2 clear feet. And then inch by inch out of the grass rose up the head and the spread hood of Nag, the big black cobra.
A king cobra.
Cobra. He was 5 feet long. That's longer than you. 5 feet long from tongue to tail. When he had lifted 1/3 of himself clear off the ground, he stayed balancing to and fro like a dandelion tuft balances in the wind, and he looked at Rikki Tikki with a wicked snake's eyes that never changed their expression, whatever the snake may be thinking of. "Who is Nag?" said he. "I am Nag. The great god Brahm put his mark upon our people." That's like a mark on the back of the snake. "When the first cobra spread his hood to keep the sun off Brahm as he slept. Look and be afraid." He spread his hood out more than ever, and Rikki Tikki saw the spectacle mark on the back of it that looks like an eye of a hook and eye fastening. He was afraid for a minute. There he is. Tom.
What?
There he is. It is impossible for a mongoose to stay frightened for any length of time. The Rikki Tikki had never met a live cobra before. His mother had fed him on dead ones, and he knew that all grown mongoose's business in life was to fight and eat snakes. Nag knew that too, and from the bottom of his cold heart he was afraid. "Well," said Rikki Tikki, as his tail began to fluff up again, "marks or no marks, do you think it's right for you to eat fledglings out of a nest?" What's a fledgling?
Baby chick.
Nag was thinking to himself and watching the least little movement in the grass behind Rikki Tikki. He knew that mongooses in the garden meant death sooner or later for him and his family, but he wanted to get Rikki Tikki off his guard. So he dropped his head a little and put it to one side. "Let us talk," he said. "You eat eggs. Why should I not eat birds?" "Behind you! Look behind you!" said Darzy. Rikki Tikki knew better than to waste time staring. He didn't even look. He just jumped in the air as high as he could. And just under him whizzed the head of Nagina, Nag's wicked wife. She had crept up behind him as he was talking to make an end of him. He heard her savage hiss as the stroke missed. He came down almost across her back, and if he had been an old mongoose, he would have known then that that was the time to break her back with one bite. But he was afraid of the terrible lashing return stroke of the cobra. He bit, but he did not bite long enough, and he jumped clear of the whisking tail, leaving Nagina torn and angry. So he bit her once and she's hurt, but She's okay. Wicked Darsy, said Nag, lashing up as high as he could towards the nest in the thorn bush. But Darsy had built it out of reach of snakes, and it only swayed to and fro. Rikki Tikki felt his eyes going red and hot. When a mongoose's eyes go red, he's angry. And he sat back on his tail and hind legs like a kangaroo and looked all around him, and he chattered in rage. But Nag and Nagina had disappeared into the grass. So he trotted off the gravel path near the house and sat down to think. It was a serious matter for him. Rikki Tikki knew he was a young mongoose, and it made him all the more pleased to think that he had managed to escape a blow from behind. It gave him confidence in himself, and when Teddy came running down the path, Rikki Tikki was ready to be petted. But just as Teddy was stooping, something wriggled in the dust. And a tiny voice said, "Be careful, I am death." It was Karit, the dusty brown snake that lies for choice on the dusty earth. His bite is as dangerous as the cobra's, but he is so small, nobody thinks of him, so he does more harm to people. Rikki Tikki's eyes grew red, and he danced up to Karit with a peculiar rocking, swaying motion that he had inherited from his family. It looks funny, but it's so perfectly balanced a gait that you can fly off from any angle you please. In dealing with snakes, this is an advantage. If Rikki Tikki had only known, he was doing a much more dangerous thing than fighting Nag. For Karit is so small and can turn so quickly that unless Rikki bit him close to the back of the head, he would get the return stroke in his eye or lip. But Rikki did not know. His eyes were all red, and he rocked back and forth looking for a good place to hold. Karit struck out. Rikki jumped sideways and tried to run, but the wicked little dusty grey head lashed within a fraction of his shoulder, and he had to jump over the body, and the head followed his heels close. Teddy shouted to the house, "Look here, our mongoose is killing a snake." And Rikki Tikki heard a scream from Teddy's mother. His father ran out with a stick, but by the time he came up, Karit had lunged out once too far. Rikki Tikki sprung, jumped on the snake's back, dropped his head between his forelegs, and bitten as high up into the back as he could hold and rolled away. That bite paralysed Karit, and Rikki Tikki was just going to eat him up from the tail when he remembered that a full meal makes a slow mongoose. If he wanted all the strength and quickness, he must keep himself thin. Teddy's mother picked him up from the dust and hugged him, crying that he had saved Teddy from death. Rikki Tikki was amused at all the fuss, which of course he did not understand. Teddy's mother might have well as petted Teddy for playing in the dust. Rikki Tikki was thoroughly enjoying himself. And we'll read more tomorrow, okay?
So read it then?
Yeah. We'll read more Rikki
Look
Tikki
at
tomorrow.
very, very, very
We did.